Hello and welcome. Tonight, let's gently drift back in time to an era often romanticized in stories of knights and castles. But beyond the stone walls and gleaming armor lies a different story, the quiet, everyday rhythm of the medieval peasantry. Settle in, get comfortable, and let's explore their world together as you prepare for a peaceful night's rest. Imagine the first light of dawn, soft and gray, filtering through the small, unglazed window of a humble cottage. This is where our journey begins. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. For the medieval peasant, the day didn't start with an alarm, but with the rooster's crow or the first rays of sunlight. There was no hitting snooze. The land and its demands set the clock. The home itself was a simple structure, often just one or two rooms. The walls were made of wattle and daub, a lattice of wooden strips plastered with a mix of wet soil, clay, sand, and straw. The floor was packed earth, perhaps lightly covered with rushes or straw for a bit of warmth and to absorb spills. In the center of the main room, a hearth fire would be crackling, the sole source of heat and light, its smoke finding its way out through a simple hole in the thatched roof. This fire was the heart of the home, where meals were cooked and stories were shared in the evenings. A family would huddle together in this space. Parents, children, and sometimes even grandparents shared the same room. Furniture was sparse and functional, a rough-hewn table, a few stools, and chests for storing precious belongings like clothes or tools. Beds were often just straw-filled sacks laid on the floor, or on a simple wooden frame. Privacy as we know it was a luxury they couldn't afford. But this closeness also fostered a deep sense of family and community. As the sun climbed higher, the work began. Life was tied to the seasons, an unending cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting. The majority of peasants were serfs, bound to the land owned by a lord. They weren't slaves, but they weren't entirely free either. They worked the lord's land, known as the domain, for a set number of days each week. In return, they were granted a small strip of land of their own to cultivate for their family's survival. Let's picture a peasant man heading out to the fields. He carries his tools, perhaps a heavy wooden plow, an ox pulling it alongside him. The work was grueling, physically demanding from sunup to sundown. Plowing the heavy, clay-like soil was a constant struggle. The technology was basic and everything relied on human and animal strength. His wife would have her own endless list of chores, tending the vegetable patch near the cottage, milking the family cow or goat, feeding the chickens, and spinning wool or flax to make cloth for the family's clothes. She was also responsible for foraging in the nearby woods for nuts, berries, and firewood, a vital supplement to their diet and fuel supply. Children were not exempt from labor. From a young age they were expected to contribute. Little hands were useful for scaring birds away from the precious crops, gathering stones from the fields, or watching over the younger siblings. Their childhood was short, and their education was practical, learning the skills they would need to survive in the same world as their parents. Formal schooling was a distant dream, reserved for the clergy or the very wealthy. Now let's think about what they ate. The peasant diet was simple and, by our standards, quite monotonous. The staple food was bread. Not the soft, fluffy bread we enjoy today, but a dark, dense, and heavy loaf made from rye or barley, known as maslin bread. Wheat was a luxury crop, mostly reserved for the lord. Their meals were often a thick stew or pottage, cooked over the open fire in a single cauldron. It would contain whatever vegetables were available from their garden, peas, beans, onions, and cabbage, thickened with oats or breadcrumbs. Meat was a rare treat, usually reserved for feast days or special occasions. A family might own a pig, which was a valuable source of salted pork to last through the winter, but fresh meat was not a daily occurrence. They drank ale or cider, as water from rivers and wells was often unsafe. The rhythm of the year was marked by agricultural festivals, which were often intertwined with religious holidays. There was Plough Monday in January, marking the resumption of work after the Christmas festivities. May Day celebrated the arrival of spring with dancing and flowers. But the most crucial time of year was the harvest, usually in late summer. Lammas Day on the 1st of August marked the beginning of the grain harvest. The entire village would work together, racing against time and weather to bring in the crops that would see them through the long, cold winter. It was a time of immense effort, but also of communal celebration once the work was done. Life was not just work, though. The village was the center of the peasants' world. The church was not only a place of worship, but also the social hub. Sundays and holy days provided a much-needed break from labor. Villagers would gather for Mass, but also to gossip, trade news, and celebrate baptisms, weddings, and funerals. The local tavern or alehouse was another important social space, a place where people could gather after a long day's work to share a drink and forget their troubles for a while. However, beneath this veneer of simple rural life, there were constant struggles. The threat of a bad harvest loomed large every year. A drought, a flood, or a pest infestation could mean the difference between survival and starvation. Sickness and disease were ever-present dangers. With limited understanding of hygiene and medicine, a simple infection could be fatal. The average life expectancy was tragically short, perhaps only reaching into the 30s or 40s. Many children did not survive infancy. The relationship with the lord of the manor was another source of constant pressure. The peasant had to pay rent for his land, not just in labor but also with a portion of his own crops, eggs or poultry. There were other fees and taxes too. A peasant might have to pay to use the lord's mill to grind his grain or his oven to bake his bread. If a peasant's daughter married, a fee was often due to the lord. If the head of the family passed away, the lord was entitled to the family's best animal as an inheritance tax, a devastating blow to a family already grieving. Justice was dispensed in the manor court, presided over by the lord or his steward, and it rarely favored the peasant. Yet, despite the hardships, this was a world of resilience. The medieval peasant found joy in small things: the warmth of the fire, a good harvest, the birth of a healthy child, the shared laughter in the alehouse. They possessed a deep connection to the land and the seasons, a knowledge and understanding of nature that we have largely lost. Their lives were woven into a tight-knit community where neighbors relied on each other for help and support. They endured, survived, and laid the foundations of the world we live in today. As we leave them to their rest, let the image of their quiet, resilient world soothe your mind. The flickering fire in the cottage, the gentle lowing of a cow in the barn, the distant sound of church bells. Let these peaceful sounds and simple scenes guide you into a deep and restful sleep. The struggles of the past fade into the quiet of the night, and all that remains is a sense of peace. Sleep well.